Heaven does not always thunder when it speaks. Sometimes, it moves in silence, through an appointment, a gesture, a title once held, and now passed on. And today, something historic has happened. The sacred corridors of the Vatican are whispering. Eyes that have long watched in silence are now turning. And at the heart of it all is a name we've heard before, but never quite like this. Luis Antonio Tagle. Because in a moment that has shocked many across the Catholic world, Pope Leo, for he's still radiant with the oil of his recent papal anointing, has made a move that no one fully expected. A move not just of honor, but of prophecy, of history, of meaning deeper than most can yet understand. In a significant development within the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV has appointed Cardinal Tagle as the new titular bishop of the Suburbicarian Diocese of Albano, a position that is not just symbolic, but sacred. Located just outside Rome, Albano is one of the 7 Suburbicarian sees traditionally assigned to cardinal bishops, the highest rank before the papacy itself. It is not a gift, it is a torch. And what makes this moment even more shocking? That very position belonged to Pope Leo XIV himself, back when he was known simply as Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost. Yes, the man who now sits on Peter's throne has handed over his own bishopric to Tagle. Coincidence? Or is heaven telling us something? For some, it's political. For others, prophetic. But for those who have eyes to see, it is something more, a sign. A mantle passed not out of formality, but of faith. Because in this sacred transaction, in the quiet halls of Rome, something ancient was awakened, and Tagle, already known as a gentle shepherd with a fiery heart, now finds himself positioned closer than ever before to the very epicenter of the Church's future. He is not new to Vatican walls. As pro-prefect for the section for First Evangelization and new particular churches under the Dicastery for Evangelization, Tagle already walks with weight. But this is a throne of legacy, a symbolic seat of succession, and all of it unfolds beneath the solemn gaze of heaven. Think of it. During the majestic inauguration mass of Pope Leo XIV on May 18th, it was Tagle, who stepped forward from the shadows of history and placed the ring of the fisherman onto the Pope's hand. The ring that binds a man to the chair of Peter was handed not by tradition, but by Tagle's trembling hands. And that act, though beautiful, may have held more than just liturgical meaning. Some now believe it was a signal, a bond, forged not by politics, but by providence. A message, not spoken aloud, but whispered through gestures, through titles, through the mysterious rhythm of the Church that few dare to interpret. So why Albano? Why Tagle? Why now? Because the Church is entering a new age, an age where the gospel must rise, again in the East, where the ancient fire of faith must be rekindled in hearts that have grown cold. And there, at the crossroads of history and hope, Pope Leo XIV has chosen a man with eyes toward Asia, a heart for the poor, and a voice the world cannot ignore. It is said that God hides the future in plain sight, that when the world sleeps, the Spirit moves, and as the headlines scream about wars and scandals and nations divided, this sacred appointment may be one of the most important signs yet. What does Pope Leo see in Tagle? What mission is quietly beginning? What role does Albano play in a future that few are yet prepared for? Only heaven knows for sure. But if you listen closely to the stillness of Rome, you'll hear it too. A door has opened, a hand has been chosen, and prophecy is stirring. They called it a quiet appointment. But heaven never moves without purpose, as pilgrims wandered the cobbled streets outside St. Peter's Square, lighting candles and praying for a church on the edge of transformation. Few knew that behind ancient marble doors, Pope Leo XIV had already made one of his most profound decisions. It didn't come with trumpet blasts or breaking news banners. It didn't need to, because it was not meant to shake the world. It was meant to shift the spirit, and now it has. The Diocese of Albano, a suburbicarian see. To the world, it may sound like an ordinary bishopric. But to those who understand the divine architecture of the Church, it is a seat wrapped in mystery, ancient power, and hidden inheritance. Only 7 of these suburbicarian sees exist. They are not just geographical territories. They are spiritual thrones, guarded across centuries, passed on like sacred keys. And now one has been handed over to Cardinal Tagle from the very hands of Pope Leo XIV. No press conference could explain the weight of that moment, because what the cameras didn't see were the tears behind closed doors, the silence between words, the unmistakable sense that something bigger than bureaucracy was unfolding. The papacy, which so often moves through tradition, had taken an unexpected turn, and Tagle was at the center of it. Some within the Church are whispering already. This isn't just about evangelization. This isn't just about Asia. They're asking, is this positioning? Is this succession? Is this divine preparation? Because remember, the one who now sits on the throne of Peter once sat in Albano, and the one who now sits in Albano has just been given the very post Pope Leo XIV vacated when the white smoke rose. Do you see it? This is not politics. This is placement. And while the faithful rejoice and the skeptics raise eyebrows, the Spirit is still speaking, quietly but unmistakably. They say Cardinal Tagle's name means little peace, but there is nothing small about what's unfolding. For years, many saw him as a possible future pope, a voice of the margins, of mercy, of mission. But now, something different is happening. He's no longer just a name among candidates. He's the heir of a chair, and not just any chair, the very one Pope Leo XIV left behind. It's as though the Holy Spirit has drawn a line, one that connects the past, the present, and a mysterious future yet to come. One that arcs from the shores of Manila to the heart of Rome, and now directly to Albano. This isn't just a story of elevation, it's a story of convergence. Because as the world fixates on crisis, scandal, and confusion, God is quietly placing his servants, one by one, stone by stone. And when Cardinal Tagle placed the ring of the fisherman on Leo XIV's hand, it was more than ritual. It was transfer, a prophetic echo, the kind of moment heaven records in silence until the day comes when the world suddenly realizes it had already begun. And maybe that's why Albano matters. Not because of its geography, but because of its timing. Because in the divine clock tower of the Church, every appointment echoes with eternity. Every name carries a mission. And this time, that name is Tagle. But what does this mean for the future of the Church? Is Cardinal Tagle being quietly prepared for something greater? And if so, what's coming that requires him to be in this place at this moment, under this Pope? Because let us not forget, Pope Leo XIV is no ordinary pontiff. His election came in the shadow of crisis. His rise marked a shift in tone, theology, and perhaps in destiny. And who was it that placed the ring upon his hand? Who stood closest to the throne? Who received his former post? Luis Antonio Tagle. Coincidence or confirmation? As the incense rose in St. Peter's Basilica during the inauguration Mass, and as the choirs sang of unity and peace, the real story was already unfolding in silence, in symbols, in sacred handshakes, in unspoken movements that reveal more to the faithful than 1,000 headlines ever could. It is no longer a question of if Cardinal Tagle will play a pivotal role in what's coming. The only question now is how soon. Do you feel it? Do you sense the urgency behind the gentleness? The thunder hiding behind a whisper? Because Albano is not just a place, it is a signal, and that signal has now been lit. And as that signal burns, quietly beneath the watchful eye of heaven, there are those, deep within the Church and far beyond, who now feel it in their spirit. Something is accelerating. There are moments in history when the church moves like a river, steady, unchanging, ancient, but then there are moments like this, when the river bends, when the direction shifts, when the divine hand reaches down, not to stir the surface, but to reroute the entire current of what's to come. This appointment, this handover of the Diocese of Albano to Cardinal Tagle is not simply administrative. No, it is the kind of move that heaven crafts with perfect precision, quietly, symbolically, and with echoes of prophecy that only the discerning will hear. Why Albano? Why now? Because Albano is not just a bishopric, it is a threshold, a spiritual borderland between what was and what will be. It was here, in this very place, that Pope Leo XIV served quietly before ascending to the chair of Peter. A chair that now calls the world to repentance, to unity, to urgency. And the one who now sits in Albano may very well be next in line to carry that flame. The old prophetic voices have spoken of a future pope who would rise not through ambition, but through obedience. Not through control, but through compassion. Not through force, but through faith. And Tagle, humble, weeping, joyful Tagle, has lived that prophecy in silence. For years, he has been the voice of the voiceless, a shepherd who smells like his sheep. A man who preaches not from power, but from pain, from empathy, from the holy ache of a church wounded by the world. He is the kind of soul that draws heaven's attention, and now he draws earth's as well. When Tagle laid the ring of the fisherman upon Leo XIV's hand, it wasn't just the crowning of a new pope. It was the beginning of something deeper, something coded, something sacred, like Elijah passing the mantle to Elisha, not in words, but in spirit. That moment was not for the cameras, it was for the throne, because only a man trusted by heaven can be trusted to touch the symbol of the fisherman and live to carry its weight. And now, days later, Pope Leo XIV gives him Albano, his own seat, his own former role, and still, the world treats it as footnote. But heaven doesn't, because in the realm of prophecy, nothing is random, and in the language of the Spirit, such a move is louder than thunder. It tells us that Pope Leo XIV is not just preparing the church for change, he is placing his pieces, silently, swiftly, as if he knows time is short, as if he knows the shaking is not over, because beneath the marble of Vatican walls, old secrets lie dormant, prophecies whispered through the ages, warnings written by saints and sealed in blood, visions seen by mystics who foretold a final storm, a moment when the church would be pressed, shaken and purified before the return of the King. And in those visions, a figure always appears, not the loudest, not the strongest, but the most faithful. And now many are wondering, is it Tagle? Is this why Pope Leo XIV moved so quickly? Is this why he gave his own bishopric to the Filipino cardinal so early in his papacy? Could it be that even now, Leo XIV is preparing the ark, and Tagle has been chosen to carry one of its sacred beams? What do they know that we don't? What has been revealed behind the veil? Because as world leaders squabble and cultures fracture, and the church stands at the crossroads of scandal and sanctity, the Spirit is still moving. God is not finished with his church. He is only beginning. And the placement of Tagle in Albano is not the end of a story. It is the prologue, a quiet thunderclap before the skies open, a whisper before the trumpet sounds, an echo of a greater appointment still to come. And deep within the hearts of those who still believe in divine timing, who still listen to the silence between Vatican announcements, who still read the signs rather than the headlines, there is a knowing that this precise appointment is a breadcrumb on the path to prophecy. Something is coming, and Cardinal Tagle has just been placed exactly where he needs to be. And so the faithful begin to ask questions that tremble at the edge of sacred mystery. Was this appointment written long before time? Did the Spirit choose Albano as a crossroads centuries ago, waiting for the hour when a humble man from the East would step into its hidden destiny? Because, make no mistake, this is not just geography, it is theology in motion. Prophecy made flesh. Albano has always been more than a diocese. It is a spiritual waypoint between the earthly and the eternal, and now, it bears the weight of a man who may yet rise higher still. There is a tremor in the church, a hush, as though creation itself is holding its breath. Pope Leo XIV moves differently. He does not speak often, but when he does, his words ring with finality. His gestures are not random, they are revelation. And in the sacred theater of papal decisions, where titles are more than titles and roles are often veils for divine mission, Leo has made his boldest act yet by giving his former seat to Cardinal Tagle. But it isn't just trust, it's timing. Think about it. Just weeks after his own election, before his papal shoes are even worn, before the dust has settled on his inauguration, Pope Leo XIV makes a move that sends tremors through the Church's deepest vaults. He doesn't assign Tagle to a distant missionary post. He doesn't give him a ceremonial title. No, he gives him Albano, the place where thrones rest, the place where silence echoes louder than thunder. And perhaps Pope Leo knows something most of us do not. Perhaps he sees the storm on the horizon, a shaking not of nations but of the soul of the Church itself. And in that vision maybe he sees Tagle, not as an option, but as a necessity. A man not built for spectacle but for suffering. Not for applause but for agony, not for the crown but for the cross. This is how heaven works. Not through politics, but providence. Not through noise, but nuance. And just as Joseph was once quietly placed at Pharaoh's side to prepare Egypt for famine, so too may Tagle be positioned, not for prestige, but for preservation. The preservation of souls. The preservation of truth. The preservation of the bride of Christ in the hour of her greatest testing. And perhaps that's why this moment matters so deeply, because the Church has entered a time of purification. Old structures are crumbling. Hidden sins are being exposed. Faith is being sifted. And in the midst of it all, God is not abandoning his church. He is rebuilding it, stone by stone, servant by servant. And Cardinal Tagle may very well be one of the cornerstone figures of that divine reconstruction. It is not difficult to imagine future eyes looking back on this very moment, on this handover of Albano, as the quiet turning point in an epic narrative heaven has been writing since the beginning of time. The day a new thread was pulled in the tapestry of salvation history. The day a future pope was positioned, not with fanfare, but with faith. And those who have ears to hear are hearing it now. The silence around this appointment is intentional, because sometimes God hides his greatest moves beneath layers of stillness. He cloaks them in simplicity. He veils them in humility, so that only the humble can see it, and only the faithful can feel it. And that's what's happening now. As the sun rises over Albano and lights the ancient stones with golden fire, a shift has taken place, a gate has opened, a role has changed, and somewhere in the heavens, the angels take note. Because the Church is moving into a new season, one where the shepherds will be tested, where the altars will be shaken, where the wheat will be separated from the chaff, and those chosen to lead through this hour will not be the proud. They will be the pierced, men who have walked through the fire, men who have wept over the world, men who, like Tagle, carry both the tears of the poor and the secrets of God in their trembling hands. This is not the end of a chapter. It is the beginning of a countdown. And with every breath, every quiet Vatican decree, every seemingly small assignment, the time draws nearer. What is coming, only heaven knows. But the Church is preparing, and Cardinal Tagle has just taken his place. And now, Now the air in Albano feels different. The stones remember. The walls, older than kings, seem to whisper, once more, because they've seen this before. They've watched as God raised up men from obscurity. They've trembled as the quiet ones, the gentle ones, the shepherd-hearted ones were anointed for storms the world wasn't ready to see. But today feels heavier, not because of fear, but because of fate. Because something unspoken has settled upon the church like morning fog, thick, mysterious, undeniable. It isn't just about a bishopric. It's about a passing. A divine baton, sealed in mystery, transferred not through words, but through will. And perhaps Pope Leo XIV knows his time is not as long as others have assumed. Perhaps he sees what lies ahead, the trial, the schism, the heavenly separation of hearts. And in Tagle, he sees the man who will not run, the man who will kneel when others rise in pride, the man who will bleed when others posture, the man who, when the cry goes out and Rome stands in smoke, will not ask, "Why me?" but will whisper, "Thy will be done." Because perhaps this appointment is not preparation. Perhaps it is insurance, a safeguard for the bride of Christ, a divine backup written into the church's DNA in case the storm comes faster than expected. And maybe that's why the appointment happened now, not later, not after a long deliberation. Now, because prophecy doesn't wait for the calendar, it bends it. And just maybe, this move was not initiated by Pope Leo XIV at all. Not truly. What if, just what if, this appointment was whispered into his soul by a voice he could not ignore? A voice older than papal traditions. A voice that once spoke through fire and cloud and silence. The voice of the Lamb who walks among the lampstands. The voice of the one who founded this church not on strategy, but on blood. And now we must ask, what else is unfolding? Because behind this holy gesture, behind this sacred positioning, there is a twist no one dares to speak aloud. What if Cardinal Tagle has not been positioned to succeed Pope Leo XIV, but to save him? What if this is not the rise of a future Pope, but the protection of a present one? What if the greatest storm to face the church is not coming from outside, but is already inside its gates? And what if the man placed in Albano, the place of thresholds, is not waiting to ascend, but standing guard? Because in the ancient rites of the early church, the suburbicarian bishop was not just a title of honor. He was a watchman, a protector, one who stood between the sacred and the profane. And maybe, just maybe, Cardinal Tagle has been positioned not for power, but for war. A war the faithful cannot yet see. A spiritual battle raging beneath the altars. A final conflict where the papacy itself will tremble. And the man who placed the ring of the fisherman will be called to protect the one who wears it, not from the world, but from within. From betrayal, from division, from deception, wearing holy robes. And in that hour, when the lights go dim and the dome of St. Peter's stands silent, it will not be policy that saves the church. It will be prophecy. It will be a man who once wept over the poor. Man who bore the burdens of the East. A man who accepted the bishopric of Albano without question. A man who, when the Holy Father is struck, will not run. He will rise. Not to take the throne, but to shield it. Because sometimes the one placed closest to the crown isn't the heir. He's the guardian. And in the end, when the final smoke clears and heaven speaks once more, it won't be power that preserved the church. It will be love. Unseen, uncelebrated, unshakable. Tagle wasn't chosen to rule, he was chosen to stand.